What's up, everybody? UFC 303 is officially in the books, and this is going to be my full card recap and analysis. Guys, I don't want to keep you here too long. I'm going to rip right through these. But I just want to first say this was a weird card, right? Don't get me wrong. There were some highlights. There were some great moments. But top to bottom, to me, this card just didn't speak to me, right, as a fight fan. So let me know what you guys think down below. This card didn't speak to me. I thought that this was one of the weaker pay-per-views of the year. However, it's always great whenever we get to see Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka fight. They're two just incredible guys. So we'll get to that as we go. So we're going to start with the early prelims, work our way up to the main event. Let's hop right into it. Ricky Simón, Vinicius Oliveira. I was blown away at how Vinicius Oliveira was able to defend the takedowns, right? It's like this guy just overnight all of a sudden learned how to be able to defend the takedowns, right? Coming into this fight, I even said, in my full card breakdown and picks video, I thought that Ricky Simón was going to have a field day. I thought that, he was going to be able to hide the takedowns behind the striking. I thought that he was going to be a little bit more aggressive. He was just letting Vinicius Oliveira just stun on him, man, dropping his hands, waving around, being all weird, like one of those things outside the car dealership. Like he was just letting him, stun on him. He checked a kick, which I thought the fight might get stopped. I wasn't sure if Oliveira broke his foot, his leg. I mean, that was a nasty check by Ricky Simón, but nonetheless, Oliveira looked great, man. He looked sensational. His movement was good. His takedown defense was very much improved. I don't think inside the UFC we've seen somebody just drastically improve the takedown defense like that before. You got to give the credit to Vinicius Oliveira, but I do want to mention Ricky Simón just did not execute the game plan. And I don't know if that's something maybe Vinicius Oliveira, the distance and the timing was giving Ricky some issues. But I was very disappointed in Ricky Simón, man. I was disappointed in him. I thought that, when Oliveira was moving around, his hands are down like this and that. I mean, look at what Alex Pereira's doing. Beat up the legs. The legs are available. If the head's moving and this and that means the legs are stationary. Beat up the legs. Drill the body with a jab. Do something, and you just got to see Ricky Simón just, I don't know, man. But I don't want to take anything away from Oliveira because that was an incredible performance. I thought Ricky Simón's veteran presence, the grappling was going to give some issues for Oliveira. Turns out it was no issue for Oliveira. This guy, he's fastly climbing into the UFC rankings at this point, man. He's an exciting fighter. He's got an exciting style. Good performance by Vinicius Oliveira. Shout out to him, man. Moving on, Tsuruya and Hernandez. We saw Tsuruya, man, get tested here. We saw him get tested, and we see that with a new guy on the scene, right? The UFC have said they're trying to kind of not push the agenda, maybe that not in a negative way, in a good way, right? They're really definitely, in my opinion, they're trying to go to Japan, whether it's a fight night, a pay-per-view. They got Tatsuro Taira. They just signed Kai Asakura from Ryzen. Tsuruya bursting onto the scene. He's, new in the flyweight division, has outstanding grappling, really, really good grappling. We saw him tested last night. We saw him tested last night, but what we saw is he's so good in the scrambles, man, and he's a very, very creative grappler, which is what I really like about him. He flows really well. There's no herky-jerky grappling when it comes to Tsuruya. Just the ebbs and the flows. I keep talking about the way he flows, man, because it is pretty to watch. Like he looks like he's in a bad position. He ends up getting himself out of it, scrambling back to his feet, then getting in top position. He ends up on bottom, getting back on top position. Like the scrambles in that matchup were absolutely insane. But nonetheless, glad to see Tsuruya get a win, man, because, anytime we get these young prospects, it's always exciting to see them go in there against a guy with some experience like Hernandez inside the UFC, see him get tested a little bit. Good performance by Tsuruya. I know there was some issues there in the third round. However, his grappling is something special. And in the flyweight division, man, that division's wide open. So we'll see what Tsuruya can do. I'm excited to see what he does next. Moving on. Arlovski and Martin Buday. Well, you remember how we were saying that the piss break should be maybe the Bueno Silva, Macy Chiasson, or the Jillian Robertson fight with Waterson Gomez leading up to this card? Turns out this should have been the piss break. This fight was absolutely embarrassing. And I know that people are going to kind of point at Arlovski to him being kind of a dinosaur inside the UFC and him, just kind of being like he needs to hang it up at this point. And, I get that. But Martin Buday is 32 years of age, I believe. He's a guy that came off the, outside of the loss to Shamil Gaziev or Gaziv, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Blob. Martin Buday showed some potential. He showed that he does have some decent grappling. He showed that he can push the pace. I'm not saying that he's a world beater. He's definitely not going to beat anybody in the top of the heavyweight division. But the fact that you're letting Andrei Arlovski in a fight with you at this point in your career is it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. Andrei Arlovski, with respect, is an absolute legend of the sport. He's not even close to the same guy. He's an absolute shell of himself. He's out there basically playing touch butt, as Nate Diaz would say, playing, touch butt, with that dork in the park, right? I know he was referring to McGregor training with a flexibility coach, but here, this is touch butt in the octagon. I mean, this was light sparring is what Andrei Arlovski's doing. I mean, he's just peppering, tap, tap, tap. I mean, there's no sting on his shots. I'm convinced that Justin Gaethje or the Max Holloway at UFC 300 or Dustin Poirier, they would be going in there hitting harder than what Andrei Arlovski's doing. And Martin Buday, to not bite down on your mouthpiece and not move forward and look to finish a guy who's throwing no power in your direction and is not even threatening any sort of takedown. It's not like if you come swinging in recklessly that Arlovski's going to dip underneath and take you down and you're going to get mauled for the rest of the fight. Like, Buday has pretty good cardio for a heavyweight, to give him credit. Just an absolutely embarrassing performance. Not just from, I know people are putting a lot of the blame on Andrei Arlovski. Blame Martin Buday. That should be a win for him. That should be an easy win for him. He should have been able to get a first-round finish over Andrei Arlovski. And I don't care that Martin Buday won the fight. I don't care. I really don't give a shit. I picked him to win the fight, and I thought he was going to get Arlovski out of there. And within 2 rounds, maybe the first round, I can't remember what my prediction was, but I definitely said a finish. This was just embarrassing for Martin Buday. Not that his stock was ever particularly high. It definitely went down, right? You're going in there, and like I said, respect to Andrei Arlovski. He's an absolute legend, but guys, we have to be honest. He's a shell of himself. And the fact that Martin Buday never decided to bite down, push forward, and just show no respect to the power coming back his way for Arlovski and just try to put some combinations together was just embarrassing. And this was definitely the worst fight on the card. No doubt about it, the worst fight on the card. So yeah, nothing impressive there from Martin Buday. I don't know what the UFC does with him next at this point. So that was hard to watch. Okay, moving on. Jillian Robertson, Michelle Waterson Gomez. Fight kind of played out the way I expected it to, right? I went with Jillian coming into this matchup, not because of the red hair, not because of Dean Thomas in her corner, but I just thought the game plan was going to be what it was, right? I thought that she was going to kind of stand when she needed to with Michelle, kind of mix in some of the grappling, keep her guessing. And, Michelle Waterson Gomez, she just seems like a great person, right? But what we have to be honest with our assessments. And I said in my, my full card picks video, I said, look, Michelle Waterson Gomez, when she's fighting these days, guys, like she's making more sounds like, hiya, ha, the sounds that she's making, she's doing more of that than anything else. I mean, a lot of the shots aren't even landing. She's like kicking the air. And I couldn't pick her in this fight. I felt like Jillian Robertson, the grappling was going to be the difference. And turns out her striking has improved as well. But I figured there was a good shot that this could be the last time we see Michelle Waterson Gomez. Nonetheless, shout out to Jillian Robertson for getting the W. And Michelle, man, you heard Dana in the post-fight interview. If you guys didn't watch that, he spoke very highly of Michelle, right? I mean, like I said, seems like a great person. Hopefully she enjoys retirement. I'm sure she's, going to do some great things outside of the cage, but it's definitely her time to hang it up, in my opinion. She just kind of looks like a shell of herself from what we got to see from her back in the day. Moving on, Peyton Talbott and Yanis. I mean, what more is there to say, man? Peyton Talbott, first of all, screw Daniel Cormier, man. How the hell? He was so disrespectful when it came to Peyton Talbott the entire week. I don't even know who that is. These guys, they have to prove themselves, really, before I have to know who they are. Something along those lines is what he was saying. Peyton Talbott decimated Cameron Simon. Cameron Simon, in my opinion, is a better fighter than Yanis. This was all about getting Peyton Talbott a sensational win. And I want to start the mod troll by channel, man. Anytime we think of a great matchup, just say, put it on the sphere. Put it on the sphere, man. Look, the UFC on International Fight Week, some of these young prospects, this was all about giving them a spotlight. It was all about giving them a spotlight, right? It was supposed to be Conor McGregor. That was the whole idea behind putting Peyton Talbott on this card, getting Pyfer in the featured prelim, getting him back on track. And Peyton Talbott just showed out, man. I mean, it didn't take long. Guy's got incredible striking, incredible power. He's very flexible. He's fast, and he's dangerous. And he called out Adrian Yanis. I love that fight. Put it on the sphere. Put it on the sphere, man. And we've seen, that's a great fight. It's a great fight because Adrian Yanis coming off a win. He looked impressive at his last fighting, but, granted, Salvador was a former flyweight, so, got to take that with a grain of salt. And we've seen, as good as Adrian is, he struggled with the jab. He struggled with some guys with some good speed in their hands. And we've seen Peyton Talbott, good speed, good power. I like that fight next, but shout out to Peyton Talbott, man. The kid is on the rise, and Daniel Cormier saying he needs to be better on the microphone, isn't that? His fighting style is speaking, to the fan base, man. The fans are tuning into Peyton Talbott now. He's a sensational prospect at this point. Excited to see him next, and I love the Adrian Yanis fight for him next. Moving on. Charles Jourdain, Jean Silva. There's an asterisk, right? There's an asterisk here. Anytime a guy misses weight, it's just disrespectful. It's disrespectful. You didn't go through the same amount of struggle. People will say, oh, it was only a pound or 2 pounds or a pound and a half. That's still a lot. There's still a lot when it comes down to the weight cut, because that's maybe another half hour to an hour in the sauna to get that extra pound off. That means that you didn't have to go to that extra mile like the other guy did in order to make the weight. So that needs to be taken into account. However, Jean Silva's power is different, man. He's dangerous for the weight class. You've seen he has some of the most power in the division at this point, in my opinion, right? For what we're seeing from him, and I know it's early, right? I know that he's not fighting the cream of the crop in the division, but this was a nice step up in competition for him, right? Charles Jourdain's a guy he cuts good angles. He's a pretty well-rounded mixed martial artist. You could just tell. Jean Silva looked bigger. He looked fuller. He looked like a tank. He just, you just got to see, once he started to, taste a little bit of the Charles Jourdain power, he's like, I don't respect anything coming back my way. Started to march him down, landed that nasty shot in tight. He's got crazy power. And the UFC, he's a character. He's a character. His walkout is incredibly annoying, by the way. So the UFC doesn't really show walkouts anymore, but I'm fine with them not showing his, at this point. However, the UFC is going to look to build him up a little bit, right? He's got good power. He's entertaining. You can tell that he loves being inside the UFC. I'm sure that he's going to be a great asset to them in terms of, stepping in and delivering, because every fight that he's had since he's been in the UFC has been entertaining. Good win by Jean Silva. Again, a little bit of an asterisk because he did not make weight. However, was still a very good performance. Shout out to him for getting the job done. Moving on, Cub Swanson, Andre Fili. I was worried about Cub coming into this fight. I just figured Andre Fili's movement, the range was going to be a little bit much. Cub was having some moments, but Andre Fili at the end of the day just looked a little bit more crisp, a little bit more technical. Cub holds his hands a little bit low. However, not a bad scrap. But again, Andre Fili, man, the range, the timing, the way he switches stances, and just some of the movement on the outside I figured was going to give an older Cub Swanson some issues at this point in his career. But Cub was landing some good shots. I mean, he landed some good right hands on Andre Fili. There were some moments where I'm like, oh, Cub's looking good. He's starting to turn it on. But then you got to kind of see him kind of fade a little bit. Andre would kind of get on his bike, move around. And that was really the difference in the matchup, right? The angles, the elusiveness, Andre Fili, I almost said Andre Arlovski. Andre Fili just doing a really good job, man, sticking and moving, not allowing Cub Swanson to kind of turn this into a brawl, because if Cub was able to turn this into a brawl, I could have seen him possibly getting the job done, but I figured coming into this matchup, Andre Fili was going to be able to kind of stick and move and sit on the outside and get the job done. So good performance by Andre Fili, and I'm not sure how many more fights we get of Cub Swanson left. So got to appreciate these guys while they're here, because Cub, definitely a legend in the sport. So I don't like seeing him lose, but again, I just figured that was going to be kind of a hard style matchup for him, considering the range of Andre Fili. Moving on, featured prelim, Joe Pyfer, Marc-Andre Barriault. This went exactly how I predicted. Joe Pyfer has some of the most power at 185. Now that Alex Pereira has moved up to 205, Joe Pyfer might be the hardest hitting 185er. I mean, his power, and guys, I've been on the record telling you, if those of you that have been around on my channel, I watched Joe Pyfer in his amateur days. I got to see one of his early in his career pro fights before he hit the UFC, back when he was fighting in Art of War. This guy's power is different, man. It's very different. The way he hits people, when the Jeremy Stevens, when I knock people out, they don't fucking move. Like, that's when Joe Pyfer hits people, man. And people want to clown on Pyfer, and I understand sometimes he can come off as a little bit arrogant, so I totally get that. And I don't like the Paul Craig call out, by the way. Basically the carcass of Paul Craig at this point, right? I mean, Paul Craig has just not looked the same over his past few fights. I don't want to see that fight at all, right? That's just Joe Pyfer wanting another win at this point, and I don't think the UFC gives him that fight. They're going to give him probably a ranked guy at this point. I mean, Paul Craig, I think, is in the rankings, but they're going to try to give him a nice little step up in competition. Brutal knockout by Joe Pyfer. Good performance by Pyfer. Just marched down Marc-Andre. Just didn't show him any respect, right? I figured the speed, the youth, the power of Joe Pyfer was going to be a little bit too much. I think it's time for Joe Pyfer to take on a contender. I'm not exactly sure what matchups maybe make sense. Maybe there's a Paulo Costa type of matchup, maybe a Chris Curtis, something along those lines possibly. But nonetheless, good performance by Joe Pyfer. Big moment, International Fight Week. Well done, my man. All right. Main card, MVP, Ian Garry. I thought MVP was going to stun on him, man. Like what we saw in the second round, I thought that that's what we were going to see for 3 rounds, if not MVP being able to get him out of there. I couldn't believe MVP's lack of takedown defense. And I know people are going to comment below, how did you not know that, man? MVP has no grappling. He doesn't have this. He doesn't have that. MVP doesn't have particularly good grappling. He doesn't have particularly good takedown defense, but what he does is he's very squirmy and slimy, and it's kind of hard to hold him down, and Ian Garry was just putting him in bad position after bad position. I mean, you got to give credit to Ian Garry for leveling up in the grappling, right? He goes over to shoot the box. He's trading with Charles Oliveira, Diego Lima. Like, we get it. Even had Damian Maia in his corner. So his grappling has definitely elevated, but he's kind of falling under a little bit of the Adesanya trap right now, right? You know, promising things that I don't want to take away from the win of Ian Garry. He got the job done, and at the end of the day, the win is all that matters. But whenever I felt like Trump there with the hands, or Chiasson. But whenever you're promising things, like Izzy's, I'm going to knock this guy out in 1 round, and you go out there and you grapple a guy for 3 rounds, or not that Izzy's grappling a guy for 3 rounds, but you go out there and you jab and leg kick for 5 rounds, which is what Izzy would do. You have Ian Garry saying, I'm going to knock out MVP, I'm faster, I'm the better striker, of this and that, and you're going out there and you're shooting takedowns and you want no part of the striker with MVP. It's like, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to stand there and exchange with MVP because of the timing. It's different, the speed. And you got to see in the second round why Ian Garry wasn't just going to stand in front of him, because, guys, Ian Garry, I've even said, I'm not the biggest Ian Garry fan. He has outstanding striking. He's one of the better strikers, definitely in the division, one of the better strikers in the UFC, in my opinion. But you just got to see levels. MVP was so much faster, and the speed and the timing, and Ian Garry did what he had to do to get the win. The problem is, how are you going to say all those types of things and you go out there and you just hold on to a guy, right? And I get, Dana White said in his post-fight presser that it was a draw, and after the fight, I literally was like, I think that might be a draw. I didn't think that Ian Garry won the fight, and I didn't think MVP won the fight. So I could have seen a draw, because the first round, Ian Garry, second round, MVP, and then in the third round, MVP's on top, and then Ian Garry takes his back, and I'm like, well, MVP half the round, Ian Garry half the round. So to me, I thought it was a draw, honestly. Maybe that's crazy. I don't know. Feel free to let me know. But nonetheless, Ian Garry got the job done. He got the win. He's shown that, he can grapple. He said he wants Colby Covington, I believe, next. So hopefully the UFC looks to book that matchup, because it's a grudge match. It's an entertaining build-up, that's for sure. And I think that, now Colby Covington can't really say that Ian Garry's not some sort of, I'm not saying Ian Garry's like a huge draw. He's a little bit of a draw. But, he's ranked inside the top 10. He just beat MVP, who's, a pretty big name. The UFC's been trying to push him as well. So Colby Covington versus Ian Garry makes all the sense in the world right now. But he's even said, look, I think he said he wants to fight Shavkat as well, right? So I don't know if the UFC is going to book that, depending on kind of how the landscape plays out at 170. But nonetheless, I mean, Ian Garry did what he had to do, and I think him versus Shavkat's a great fight. I think him versus Colby Covington's a fun build-up. I don't know how great of a fight that is. I don't think Colby Covington would have a lot of success against Ian Garry, but nonetheless, just kind of a shocking way that fight played out, in my opinion. But, shout out to Ian Garry for getting the job done. Moving on. Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson. So weird scenario, man, because Bueno Silva takes the first round. I believe all 3 judges gave the first round to Bueno Silva. She was doing what she had to do. She was controlling the fight. And in the second round, you saw Chiasson get the takedown and land a nasty, nasty elbow. And I even tweeted the way she threw that elbow, right? She basically, what we would say, checking the time, which is where you turn, instead of just throwing an elbow like this, she went to check the time, turn, you basically look at your wrist. And what that does is it sharpens the blade of the elbow. Instead of landing like this, now you're coming down on the blade of the elbow. And that's exactly what she did, a slicing elbow. And that's why she gashed her open so bad. That was a nasty cut. It was a great stoppage by the doctor, who I think the doctor makes that call, right? And then the referee, you could see there were some concerns there. Dana even after was like, Bueno Silva went over to it. He's like, no, it's a good stoppage. I mean, when you have a cut and a gash that deep, you just can't let the fight continue, right? I know that you got to kind of protect fighters from themselves at this point. That was too big of a gash. That was just going to keep leaking, and at that point, we're kind of toting the line of if it was a little bit smaller and it's not as big, like maybe they let it play out. But given how nasty that gash was and how big it was, I feel like that was a pretty good stoppage. But nonetheless, Macy, she caused that damage, right? People are going to try and take it away from her. She caused that damage. That was a nasty elbow. The way she rotated it over and caused the damage there. Good performance by Macy Chiasson, and a big win for her over Mayra Bueno Silva. Maybe, I don't know if they try to rebook that fight because the division, it needs some life in it, right? I don't know what potential matchups there could potentially be for Macy at this point, but nonetheless, good performance because, like I said, she created the damage with that elbow. Don't take anything away from her. Okay, moving on. Anthony Smith, Roman Dolidze. Just an abysmal fight. Just overall, guys, right? And I get that both of these guys took the fight on short notice. Roman Dolidze going up a weight class. I thought that Anthony Smith was going to be able to control this fight. I really did. I thought Anthony Smith was going to be able to do a little bit more. I thought that Roman Dolidze was going to be a little bit more affected by moving up a weight class. Sometimes we see that bode well for guys. Sometimes we see them fatigue a little bit from not being used to carrying around that type of weight. But nonetheless, Roman Dolidze was just outpointing Anthony Smith. He was controlling the fight. Anthony Smith just looked labored. He looked sluggish. He looked slow. And on paper, maybe he wins the fight, right? But in terms of reality, Roman Dolidze just was the cleaner fighter in this matchup, which is just, it was just crazy to me. I was just disappointed in what we saw from Anthony Smith. But like I said, shout out to Roman Dolidze. Did what he had to do to get the job done. And he says he wants to fight in both weight classes, which I like that. I like guys that want to stay active, guys that want to test themselves in different weight classes. I don't know what potential matchups there are for Roman. Shout out to him for stepping in on short notice. But nonetheless, just not a particularly great fight. Not a whole lot to say, honestly. Okay, the co-main event. Diego Lopes versus Dan 2-hour notice Ige, right? I mean, this was just history. I mean, Dan Ige lives in Vegas, trains at Extreme Couture. Eric Nixick's his coach, trains with Sean Strickland, those guys over there. Getting a massage, gets a phone call. And can you just imagine, like Dan Ige, you go about your day, you wake up, you're maybe you got some training in the morning, you go and you get a massage, you're sitting there laying there like, oh man, I'm getting rubbed out, I feel good. And then you get a phone call and it's like, hey man, you want to fight in the co-main event of International Fight Week on a pay-per-view that has a $16 million gate? Like that's crazy. And first of all, I mean, Dan Ige, we all know that he's a savage, absolute savage. Goes in there on short notice against Diego Lopes. And shout out to Diego Lopes as well, man. People are talking about Ige. How about Lopes? I mean, first of all, he's supposed to be fighting Brian Ortega at 145. 2-week notice, which I was worried about the weight cut, honestly. 2-week notice. It's kind of hard because these are two bigger guys at 145. Then they adjusted to 55. Ortega is sick or has a fever or something along those lines of 103 or whatever, I believe is what they said. So, he wasn't cleared to compete. And then at the last second, you have, Diego laying at 160-something, for a catch weight, 165-pound catch weight against Dan Ige. So, I mean, just craziness for Diego Lopes, craziness for Dan Ige, and they put on a hell of a fight. I mean, that was a pretty entertaining fight. Dan Ige was supposed to have a fight on July 20th, yet to be seen if he'll still be in that fight as well, but great performance by Dan Ige. Diego Lopes looked really, really good for 2 rounds. You get to see, man, I mean, the minute you take Diego Lopes down, he is instantly threatening with submissions. He is very dangerous. He's very nasty in terms of the jiu-jitsu. His striking, he loads up, gets a little bit wild in some of the exchanges, but he just gassed in the third round. And I know people are going to kind of, pick at him for that, maybe, try to blow that narrative up or whatever they're going to say. But man, whenever you think you're fighting at 145, you get woken up in the middle of the night, it's at 55, now it's at 160 something, like just so much bouncing around. It's kind of hard to look too much into that at this point. But nonetheless, we learned a lot about both guys. One, Dan Ige's a savage. He's got good power. That's a good win for Diego Lopes, man. And Dan Ige had nothing to lose on this matchup, taking it on like 3-hour notice. Nothing to lose. Pretty good fight, nonetheless. I mean, and shout out to Ige, man. Won the third round, which was very impressive. But Diego Lopes, man, showed that he is a very legit guy in the featherweight division. I imagine both of these guys put him on the sphere. Both of these guys want to be on the sphere. Dane even said in the post-fight press conference, I'll do whatever those guys want. So hopefully they get matchups on the sphere and get to be a part of that card at this point. So moving on, main event, Alex Pereira, Yuri Prochazka 2. I called it to a T, man. I even had a video that said, my prediction video said Alex Pereira finishes him inside 2 rounds. And, it wasn't to be disrespectful to Yuri because I like Yuri. I think he seems like a great guy. It's kind of hard to dislike him, right? The spirit, no magic, no bullshit. Like, I like Yuri Prochazka. He's got a good personality. He's fun. He's got a fun style. But with that style, I just figured that there were going to be some issues in this rematch with Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira's been in there sparring with, Dempsey McKean, a big heavyweight southpaw in preparation for this fight, which is why I was like, I felt like that was a mistake for Yuri to go southpaw. Alex had been sparring with, a southpaw leading up for the fight. And I get it, trying to get, not give him that lead leg out of the orthodox stance for the calf kicks, but Alex can attack both legs, man. We saw it against Jamal Hill, whether you're southpaw orthodox, he just has a way of getting to the calf. And I told you, in my prediction video, he's not going to show Yuri much respect. He was moving forward a lot more in this fight. Defensively, he was very sound. Yuri barely landed anything. Alex, did a very good job when Yuri tried to close him down up against the fence, avoiding being taken down, getting back to space, landing the calf kicks. The jab was stiff. It was nasty. He landed a nasty right hand. And the left hook that dropped Yuri right before the end of the first round was just filthy. And then the head kick. He said in the locker room they were watching Yuri warm up. They saw the video on social media and saw when he was checking kicks, he was dropping his hands. That's what when Alexis like, I should test a high kick. He did, caught him with it. Just a savage, man. Just an absolute savage Poatan is. And it's just... I'd like to see him versus Magomed Ankalaev next personally. I know people are talking about him maybe going to heavyweight. I'm not so sure that now is the time for that just yet. Maybe it is, right? I don't know. But I think him versus Ankalaev is a very intriguing fight. I like that matchup. I don't know when they would do that, right? So maybe, I don't know if Poatan's going to want to wait that long because typically they do Brazil early, into the following year. So it would be early 2025. I don't know if Alex would wait that long, considering maybe he's broken some toes and things like that. The guy likes to be active, but nonetheless, I'd love to see him get a title defense in Brazil. I think that would be huge. I think that'd be big for him and the UFC, but nonetheless, man, incredible performance by Poatan. But I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Like this video, comment your thoughts on the card down below, subscribe to the channel, help your boy out. I would appreciate it. See you next time.